Welcome. Okay, so today is our next part of our Money Matters Masterclass series that I am running here on YouTube and on Instagram. And today's topic is, what is the most important metric for investors? So if you are on live or on the replay, please say hi and where you are watching in from. And let me know if you are currently investing. If you're brand new to me, my name is Susan McVeigh. I am a married mama of two. I am a business, sales, and wealth strategist, spiritual entrepreneur, kingdom business builder, and I talk about all things related to business, money, sales, and faith. So, uh, I always say that I'm a married mama of two because I work from home, and sometimes there's hashtag real life, and so I never know exactly what's going to happen in the moment. So I try to do these during the day, but sometimes life doesn't work that way. Um, so, what is the most important metric? And this is a bit of a trick question. Not that I'm trying to be tricky, but again, a lot of these questions, like if you go on and you Google them, right? Last week I had talked about what is the best investment. The answer is it depends. And even for this, the answer really is it depends. And we're going to talk about the one metric that I think a lot of us talk about when it comes to investing, because I think it's important that we understand what it means, how to describe it, how to understand it, and how to assess it for ourselves. Because the Bible says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. If we don't know, then we can't do. And if we don't do the right things, then we are doomed to keep repeating mistakes that we don't want to happen. Right. And so the more we know, the better we do. So at least that's my premise. So that's the lens by which I share this. So do with it what you will. Um, Now, what I want you to understand is anytime that you Google these questions and you get pages and pages and pages of information and they are all different, right? Like, have you ever gone in and Googled something and you are more confused than before you started? Has that ever happened to you? You're Googling a question, you think it's a really valid, it's a good question, but there's pages, pages of information. In today's day and age, this is an information age. Now, more than ever, what is going to differentiate what we do with that information is wisdom, right? And so knowing what to do is half the battle. Knowing when to use that information is the other half. And I would say, actually, much more important than the knowing of what it is to do. Because once you know something, you have to be able to discern the right time to be able to implement what it is that you know. Does this make sense? Hello, over on Instagram, 1K Cheetah from LA, California. Amazing. And I was originally okay, but it started to rain today. And so I have like a cap sleeve sweater. So I had to throw this on over top in order to stay a little bundled up. So if you are an investor right now, let us know in the chat, right? You can comment. This is like real life. This is real live. And even if you're on the replay, feel free to communicate. Feel free to interact, because if you have any questions, I will come back and I will answer them where appropriate, right? Again, this is not financial advice. This is strictly for education and information purposes, really edutainment, because I am not your financial advisor, nor do I know anything about what your personal circumstances are. And unless somebody actually has that level of detail, which will be dependent upon how much information that you share, they can't help you properly. So even for clients that work with me closely, unless they share very specific pieces of information with me, I only get a part, right? The Bible says we know in part, we see in part. If we only know in part, if we only see in part, then there's only so much that I can do with that part that I see or know. Now, that being said, I have now, 30 plus years doing this type of work for myself, for clients. And so I know a lot, but but all that to say, if you don't tell me what's going on, if I'm not honest with myself, if you're not honest with yourself or those who are meant to help you, then they can't help you, not at least to the fullest of their capacity. Okay. So I know with Money Matters, and that's why we're talking about this particular series, um, it can make us feel a certain way, and it can be very taboo, and it can be reserved for the ultra wealthy, so to speak. At least that's the perception, right? That the I mean, we hear it said all the time: the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Well, part of that is because they get help. And part of it is because they're okay to talk about money. And when we try to climb out of these social classes, the people that we're around don't often operate in the same way as those that are in a different level of income, in a different level of economic stature, in a different level of just wealth, right? So I'm very grateful. I know I'm privileged that I was placed in an industry that I got exposed to not just the poorest of the poor, but also the richest of the rich and everything in between, so that I can share some of this information with you and with those that are working closely with me for clients, that we develop like specific strategies. Again, not financial advice, but this is all very important, because in order for you to create a cohesive plan, you have to be able to discern what is the most important for you. So if nothing else, this series is to help you be armed with the language of money, because money, just like science, just like anything else that you're dealing with, right? Your area of expertise, it has a specific language. There's certain terminology, there's certain information, there's certain language, there's certain words that, unless you're in the know, it makes it very difficult for other people to understand what you're talking about. Investments and money management is one of those areas where people feel very uncomfortable, because it tends to make them feel stupid. And you're not stupid. You, just like anything else, need to learn the skill. So it's just like when I am helping clients learn the skill of sales. You don't wake up one day knowing everything there is to know about sales and business. You don't wake up one day knowing how to manage money. Even if you were born into the richest family possible, you do not know all the things under the sun related to money and wealth management. Those families that keep their money from generation to generation to generation, and on average, the wealthiest families, they don't keep their money beyond the third generation. Okay. So the ones that are able to do that generation after generation after generation, they're in the business of wealth management. Okay. Like, who's a really well off at, like, maybe I don't even know the history of the Rockefellers, like maybe they're beyond generations, but the Rockefellers are in multiple business lines, right? Their main business is not about tobacco or food products or even pharma. Their main business now is to teach their children how to manage and steward the money, so that it doesn't waste away and dwindle from generation to generation to generation. At this point, all they need to do is maintain what they've already gained, right? So I don't know who needed to hear that. That was a bit of a caveat. So let's wheel back to today's topic, which is, what is the most important metric for investors? And again, at the very beginning, I said this is a bit of a trick question, because my answer is going to be, it depends. And you're probably going to get sick and tired of me saying this pretty much with every single topic that I talk about, because a lot of it is going to be, it depends. Now, I'm going to give you my perspective and my, oh, Eddie, there's no sound. Let me see. I think one Key Cheetah had sound because she was responding. I think it was a she. Is it Cheetah? Because I don't actually know your name. Hello, Brianka. Oh, you can hear now. Okay, perfect. So maybe it was just a little bit for your tech to work. But thank you for letting me know, because that would be terrible if I was continuing to talk and nobody could hear me. So what I was saying is that this Money Matters Masterclass series, that I will be doing regularly on here, at least every Wednesday, unless something happens in life, which I'm a human, so that could happen, right? Um, Most of the time, the answer is going to be it depends. And it's not because I'm trying to be facetious. It's not because I'm trying not to answer the question. In today's in today's episode, like this live, I will give you the most common investor metric that most people talk about. And I'm going to allow you to understand how I want you to really think through it for yourself. Okay. But at the end of the day, the most important metric will depend on what's most important to you. Because you might invest in something that gives you the highest rate of return and it robs you of peace. Like, meaning you could be invested in something that is so high risk that you can't sleep at night. I've had clients do this. And here's the thing. We talked about this last week. So if you missed last week, I really encourage you, you need to go and watch it. I know it's long. It's like, I think it's 2 hours long. It lays a foundation and it is extremely important so that you understand uh, how you are going to look at investments moving forward, right? So there's a few different components that we touched on. Today, this question here is really about helping you to look at what do you want to measure, right? And it's okay if right now there is a measurement that uh, is going to change over time, right? Meaning, like, you need something to give you the highest rate of return. That's okay, right? There may be other times where you go, you know what, Susan? I don't want the highest rate of return simply because I can't afford to take the risk, right? My job is very risky. The things that I have around me don't give me a lot of security or stability. It makes me very uncomfortable. My risk tolerance, just the way that I am, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I knew that that money, right? Sometimes this happens with investments where it's an inheritance. Like, my parents gave me that money, my grandparents gave me that money, my auntie or uncle gave me that money, a friend loaned this to me, and I want to be a good steward of it, which we all should. But at the same time, if you don't understand how to take a calculated risk, then everything is going to feel like it is uncertain and scary. And that's what we're trying to eliminate. Okay. So when you look at, so let's just get right into this, because the number one metric that most people talk about, that when we talk about investing and being an investor, is return on investment. Because people are looking for, if I put in $100, what's my return? What am I going to get out of this? Which, fair enough, that is a very good question to ask, because, you know, if you're going to be an investor, then you should get something out of your money, right? So if you're investing $100, we're just going to use round numbers. These are all hypothetical. Again, not financial advice. This is strictly for information purposes, to help educate and inform, and hopefully I might be a little entertaining, but I don't think I'm particularly funny. So if I make a joke, I'm probably going to be the only one laughing. Okay. So when we look at return on investment, let's go to, I'm pulling it up here. We're going to go to, I think this is Investopedia, but if you just Google this, okay, return on investment, you're going to get a very straightforward calculation, right? If you ask Google, what is the most important metric for investors, you're going to get a whole bunch of different situations coming up. Now, that being said, the most common answer that you're going to get is likely going to be return on investment, because, again, most people, if you put in $100, you put in $1,000, you're expecting to get something back. Now, what is that expectation? I don't know. That's going to depend on all the factors that we talked about last week. So you need to go and rewatch that. If you watched it and you don't understand it, go back and rewatch it. If you missed it, you're going to need to go and mark in your calendar to sit down and go through that class. Okay. So your return on investment, let's say you put in $100, and let's say it is now, oh gosh, I'm going to have to do some math. Okay, let me just use the example that they have. So they're going to be big numbers. Just bear with me. So if you say that you put in $500,000 and now, I don't know if this will show right side up. It might be backwards on Instagram. So that's $1 million. Okay, so let's say you put in $500,000. Now it is $1 million. To calculate your return on your investment, you're going to take what the amount is, $1 million. You're going to take off what you originally put in, which is 500K. This is probably backwards. I apologize because I hate doing math when you can't see the numbers because I know sometimes it's hard to get it right in your head. So, and then you're going to divide it by your original amount. So you divide it by 500,000. Okay. So end minus beginning divided by your beginning. That is going to equal a certain amount. Okay. In this case, it is 100% because it equals 1. And we're dealing with percentage points here. Does this make sense? Are we all tracking? Did I lose anybody because of the math? I hope not. Because unfortunately, that's just a function of sometimes when we're trying to describe some of these things. Okay, so I see some hearts. Thank you for sticking with me. So now, back of a napkin sort of idea, it conceptually makes sense, right? That if I put in 500,000 and at some point in the future, the money that I get back is $1 million. So if we use smaller numbers to make this super simple math, that if I put in $100 and some point down the road, it turns into 200, right? It turns into $200. I have doubled my money. I have doubled my money. So people use different words to describe the same thing, which is why sometimes it gets very confusing. So I've doubled my money. I have essentially made 100% return, right? Now, is that good? You let me know. What are your thoughts? If you put in $100 and you get back 200, is that a good investment? Is that an investment that you would make? And there's no right or wrong answer. Okay? There's no right or wrong answer. You cannot get this wrong because the answer is it depends. Okay. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm going to tell you why it depends. It depends because if you were a good student of last time, we're going to connect dots so that you can kind of build off of what we've already done, okay? So it depends because how long did you have to wait for that money? Right? Did you invest $100 and you got back 200 and it took 20 years? Was that a good investment? Maybe. If all you wanted was your $100 back, because maybe you loaned it to your kid and you didn't expect to get back anything, that's a pretty good investment, right? Maybe you invested in something that was supposed to give you 100% return, but within a very short time frame. Maybe you were expecting that in 3 months, and instead it took 20 years. That's a bad investment according to your definition, according to your expectations, right? So in this case here, we have to look at what did you expect to receive, right? And in what time frame? And with what amount of risk were you willing to take in order to receive X amount, whatever that expected return is? Okay. Now, most investments, unless they're guaranteed, will not give you here's the rate of return. So, most investments, because they're on the riskier side, right? So, if you're not dealing with a guaranteed investment certificate, a term deposit, a COD, a CD, something that is cash on deposit, and then you get that cash back with a certain amount, you have no guarantee of what the rate is. Bonds are a little bit different. Bonds, you'll get a rate of return that's guaranteed, but the value of the bond will go up and down. So you might not get back what you put in. You'll get a guarantee of the investment, the amount that you make, but the value of what you put in, so let's say it's 100 bucks and you're guaranteed 5%, right? So you're going to get 5 bucks as your interest. But the value of the bond could go down. It could be, 80 bucks. It could be 90 bucks. So you're making $5, that's the guarantee, but you may or may not hold the initial value. Does this make sense? Okay. So that's why when we say, like, is that a good rate of return? According to what? Like, what are you measuring this compared to? Right? It's the same as when people say, oh, that's so expensive. Compared to what? Right? Like, if you were trying to buy a McLaren for 60 grand, that's a steal of a deal because it's a $250,000 car, right? If you were trying to buy a custom Rolls Royce, um, which somebody I know has just gotten one of five, right? That has a very specific type of paint job, right? One of five in the US. Well, I don't know how much she paid for it. I'm going to guess that it was at least 450, 500 grand, right? Um, but is that expensive? Again, according to what, right? Compared to what? And so, and I'm using these big numbers because I want us to get familiar with what it's like to be around big numbers and have it not mean anything about that or you or them. It has nothing to do with anybody at all. It just is. It's like me saying this pen, I think I paid a buck for it, but I could buy another pen that's 1,000 or $2,000. They function the same. They're still just a pen, but you might feel differently about it. Maybe, maybe not, right? We want to get to the point where we don't feel feelings because of the things that we have. They just are. And we get to feel how we feel because we are feeling beings, expressing ourselves through our emotions as humans. Does this make sense? So, if you look at the return on an investment, it's a simple calculation, right? What do I put in? What do I get out? And what's the difference? And if we take that amount, right? So we'll give you the calculation again, which is if I put in $100 and I make $200, it's the difference divided by my original investment. So in this case, 100 bucks growing to $200 is a 100% increase. Okay. Now, whether or not that's good will depend on what you're expecting. It will depend on what other opportunities you might have had. And it depends on the amount of risk that you had to take relative to what you received and the time frame, how long it took for you to receive that. So let me give you a real life example. Okay. So because I'm an active investor. Okay. I am an active investor. It's kind of a game for me. I have a financial planner. So I have somebody who does this full time. I don't do this full time because it really is a full time job. Now, can you do it and not have it be full time? Yeah, lots of people do it. But to do it well, to learn it, you will need to invest time, right? That is also an ROI. If you're investing a certain amount of time, if you're investing an hour of time to learn something, what are you expecting to get? And it's okay if you say, I expect to get nothing but just sheer enjoyment, to sheer, like just pure satisfaction, just being able to say, I learned something new, right? That is okay. That is a return on your investment. If you spend an hour, watching a Netflix show, right? You're investing your time. What is the return on that? Well, does it allow you to spend family time? There have been times where I've had to sit on the couch with my kiddos watching something that I personally want to watch. Not my cup of tea. But I've decided to invest the time because it wasn't about the thing on the TV. It was about the time spent with my family. And you can argue with me, don't come at me, like the quality of that time, I get it, but I have teenagers. I'll take everything I can get, right? Like I will take every minute that they will sit on the couch with me, watching the same thing as me, rather than thinking that what I watch ain't so cool anymore. Because we're in those stages of life, okay? So that to me is valuable, right? Again, value is going to depend on your perspective. And this is why when we try to influence other people and say, well, that's not valuable, according to who? According to you? And that's okay if that is, but just know that you're placing a value judgment on somebody else and asking them to qualify or quantify what they believe in and what they're willing to invest in based off of your parameters. And if you watched last week, you'll understand why that is not always a good thing and why a lot of times couples in particular can come to heads. Money is the number one reason why people divorce. It's money and sex. And often they're very closely related, right? Because when you have money stress, you're probably not doing a lot of stuff between the sheets with your partner, right? Because you're arguing, right? You're not on the same page. And so if you can get on the same page about what your money matters are and what matters most to your money, because it's going to bring up all kinds of stuff, then you are able to weather anything, anything, because you have complete trust. And oftentimes people have money issues because they're not being honest. So if you can look at these questions through the lens of what is this bringing up for me, right? What is Susan asking me really to investigate for myself? Because it's about money, but it's also not about money. Does this make sense? Right? That the money is just one piece of the puzzle. And you might feel like it's the most important piece, but I'm here to tell you it's the easiest and the simplest piece. And we overcomplicate things. And we don't need to, right? Um, w- my job here is to keep things as simple as possible and to give you different ways around it, to be able to think about it in different ways, to give you the language of money so that you can be armed with the resources, the tools, and the knowledge so that you can start understanding when you now go and Google, oh, that's why I get so many different answers. That's why nobody is giving me, what I'm looking for. It's not because they actually don't know. It's because this answer and so many of the questions that we ask, there is no this is the right answer. There's only what's the right answer for you. And unless you help people that are helping you with the information that they need, then they can't help you the best way that they can. Does this make sense? And it's uncomfortable. 100%. It's uncomfortable because what it's going to bring up is, oh my gosh, the last time I invested, all this stuff happened. This happened. I made this mistake. I got swindled. So I'll give you an example because I'm not immune to it, right? You trust people and you try to think that this is what it's going to be. I had a client who came to me and said, oh my gosh, I got caught in this whole elaborate scam, this whole scheme. And I had said to her, well, maybe you went through it because you were supposed to tell other people about it, right? Like maybe this is the reason why you went through it is to help other people so that they don't have to go through it. Now, I'm not sure exactly what she did with that information. Again, that's on her. But what I can tell you is I have gone through situations that I have told my community about, I have told my clients about, where despite my best efforts, despite my background and knowledge, there are still people who are complete shysters. So why have, oh, what's this? Bernie Madoff, right? Bernie Madoff was a Ponzi scheme. It was a whole pyramid, but under the guise of knowing what he was doing. And they're very elaborate when they do these things, right? So when we go through these situations, I've been caught in one where you think, well, it looks like it should be okay. Now, here's the caveat: trust your gut, right? Trust that still small voice. For me, that comes from God, Holy Spirit, Jesus, whatever you believe in, discern what it is for you. But I guarantee you that there's always a red flag, there's always a warning sign, there's always something that like nags at you, and that because you think, I don't know enough. Like that. So this was in an area, this was in a type of investment that I was not super familiar with. And because of that, I thought, well, maybe it's okay, right? I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I had been warned multiple times, like, oh, I should go and look at it. I should go and look at it. I should go and look at it and pull my money out. And I didn't. And the day that I finally did it, it was too late. Gone. Like I couldn't access it. And it wasn't a small sum of money, right? And so I share this because I was looking at it through the lens of what is the ROI? Well, I knew it was super risky. I knew that it was like it could go up in smoke. But for what I was trying to do, I was willing to take the risk, right? And it made sense for me. Now, I had access to those funds, but I didn't pull the trigger right away. And so that's what I'm talking about, right? And I'm being a little bit cryptic because the details aren't super specifically important. And because I am not here to provide financial advice, and talking about specific investments, what I find is it gets you really tunnel visioned into like, what about this? What about this? What about this? So, like, if I was to say that was a stock, guess what you would ask? Oh, what stock was it? Oh, what should I invest in here? Like, what do you think about this stock? What do you think about this bond? What do you think about this? If I said it was crypto, you do the same thing. Oh, what do you think about Bitcoin? I mean, what would you have me say? Like, I have lots. I have lots of thoughts. I have lots of opinions, but do they really matter to you? Maybe, probably not. Are they super relevant to you? I can't say because I don't know what's going on for you. And so it would be irresponsible for me to just give blanket advice over a situation by which I know nothing about personally, right? And that's why class number 1 was so important because you cannot take what I say. And honestly, when I was licensed, because sometimes people ask, well, are you a licensed advisor? No, I'm not, which is why I say this is not financial advice, right? And people who are not licensed and have been licensed in the past giving financial advice will always say this is not financial advice. It is the people who have never been licensed before who will freely give you financial advice and have no problem doing so. There's more crackdowns and regulations happening. Mark my words, people are going to get slammed. It's been happening in the coaching space where people are making wild income claims, and maybe they're not even so wild, but people are getting taken and they're not okay with it, and nor they should be. And as a result, the SEC, the FTC in the US, they're cracking down. And you will see more and more and more of this happening across the board. So be very wary of folks who have made a lot of money personally and they have the results. By his fruit, we will know them. And that's great. But at the same time, what they have taught may work for the majority. But if they do not have proper compliance, if they do not have the proper disclaimers, they could get into a lot of hot water. And I just, if that's you, if that's somebody that please, please just let them know to be on the right side of good. And sometimes it's not because they're not meaning well, it's because they simply don't know. They've never been licensed, so they don't understand what it means to be compliant. I'll give you an example. I have a client, real estate investor. She was looking for real estate investors in her real estate business. And when she started doing this, she didn't think anything of it because she was like, yeah, I'm super excited. I want to help people. I want them to be able to get in this opportunity and do what I'm doing. And we can guarantee them a certain amount because she'd run the numbers. And that's what her business was able to do. Now, she did not know that in my background in finance, I actually had clients doing private mortgages, which is essentially a similar line of business that she was getting into. That is a money service business. A money service business is regulated. It is a heavily regulated, and there are severe fines if you are not on the right side of the law. Well, she got fined. She got a hefty fine, like tens of thousands of dollars. She did not know, right? She did not swindle anybody. She was not meaning to take anybody's money and run. This was like a legit up and up, like here's an opportunity and we want people to come in on it because we need help and we want to work in partnership. But because she didn't know, she got slapped. Now, thankfully, it was before things started to take off because it could have been so much worse. But it meant that she needed to be very, very careful about the language that she was using in order to be able to communicate what that opportunity looked like, right? And how she could position it. And because of it, I know that I mean, she had me review stuff, right? I reviewed things. She had a lawyer look over it. We tried to figure out if there was like different financial advisors or people who could help her because it was such a very specific space around the marketing language and being compliant with the SEC and all of these different components. And she's like, I just want to help people, Susan. I just want to help them make more money. Like we're doing this and it's such a great opportunity. And I was like, I believe you. I understand. But this is this is sensitive territory, right? And it's because the rate of return. She was giving a guarantee and she was essentially loaning money, right? So the reason why I share this is because if it sounds too good to be true, pause, because there is never any opportunity that is so good that you would miss out on that wouldn't come around again. Now, when it comes around again, might look different, right? Like if we use Bitcoin as an example, my brother-in-law tried mining Bitcoin at the very early stages. He can't access any of that, unfortunately, because it's just the way that his system just was like, nope, no can do. But back then it was like a buck, $5, $6, even at $60 is now at 60,000 plus, right? So when we look at the opportunity, people are still going into that because there's still upside potential, but they've decided that they're willing to take the risk, right? And for the timeline and the amount of risk that they're willing to take, that the rate of return that they can expect is reasonable for them, that it meets their needs, that it accomplishes and achieves their goals. So, what does your investment help you to achieve? Does it produce the rate of return that you're expecting or that you need? Because sometimes I need a certain amount in order to be able to achieve my goal. There's other times where I've had clients where they could not afford mentally, right? They could afford to lose the money, but mentally, it was not something that they would be willing to entertain. And as a result, they had to be okay to take a lower rate of return because they wanted more guarantee of safety, a better risk management, and higher level of peace in their mind. Right? They wanted to be able to sleep at night, right? And that's okay because you have to be able to know what is it that I am optimizing for? What is it that I am prioritizing? And if it is rate of return, right, that is my most important metric or the most important measurement by which I am going to determine my success for my investments, then you have to understand rate versus risk, right? Go back and watch the previous class on this that I did last week because I explained that in a little bit more detail. We're not going to go into it today. So, in order for you to properly decide, is the return on my investment something that I'm okay with? Number one, you have to know thyself. And number two, you have to be able to answer the key criteria that I answered around what makes a good investment, right? Because good is a relative term. Your rate of return or your return on investment will depend on what it is that you need that money for, because it will then kind of funnel that money and funnel that investment into different investment choices that give you an appropriate rate of return based off of what you expect. Okay. So Let me see if this is all making sense. I'm going to take a drink. If you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat, either live or on the replay. Um, if you're still okay, so I see the heart. So thank you, because it lets me know, because I know it's like kind of dinner and later in the evening. So you might be getting ready for bed or watching in, headphones. Hard to see the screen to be typing. So that's okay. Okay. So awesome. I want you to ponder on. So these are the questions that I want you to answer from today. I want you to think about, because it's building on last week, right? So number one, if you did not watch last week, go and watch it. Plug it into your calendar. If you watched last week and you're like, oh, I just because we're connecting the dots between that and this and layering. Okay. Put it in your calendar. Go and rewatch it or watch it. Take notes. Think about your personal situation. Think about the investments that you have. And I'm not just talking about money, although for this Money Matters series, that is the primary lens through which I'm explaining things. But I'm also want you to think about all the different types of resources that you invest in, right? I gave you an example of my time because I was wanting a return on my relationships, right? My return on my relationship with my children and with my family. So for me to invest an hour, 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours watching something I could care less about, just so that I can simply be present with them, is worthwhile. Okay. It's worthwhile. Um, for you, it may not be. I don't know. Right. For you, it may not be. And in certain seasons of my life, it hasn't been. When I was very first starting my business, me sitting down and watching TV with my husband, I cut it out because I had to trade I had trade-offs. I was like, well, I need a certain amount of rest. I needed like 16 hours of rest. So if that's what's required and I have already dedicated, 3 to 5 hours that I'm not only just building a business, but I have to learn. I have to learn how to do this. There are different skill sets. Well, I'm making an investment of time, but I also made an investment of money. And so if I'm investing in myself, if I have invested in this course, if I have invested in this community, if I have invested in this program, if I had invested in this coach, which is ultimately an investment into my future, then I have to be able to actually implement. And I can't do that if I don't have the time and the space to be able to do that. And so at the beginning stages, I had to ruthlessly cut out the things that at that point they had to take a little bit of a back seat. Now that's not to say my family is extremely important to me. Between God and family, those are my one and two. But I wanted to build the business in order to help support, number one, the calling that God has in my life, and number two, the financial freedom that ultimately I wanted for my family. We already are a certain level of wealth, right? But there's so much more that's still in store, that there's only up and up and up and up, right? The Bible says from glory to glory to glory to glory. So that is really where I was coming from, because I wanted to have complete time freedom. And at the time that I built my business, I didn't have complete time freedom. I was still, at that point, just had finished a job where I was working like 60 hours, right? Partly led to my breakdown. I was burnt out. Um, so I had to make choices. So you will have to make choices. When you make an investment, there is not like an unlimited amount of opportunities. There are limitations that you impose on the choices that you make, but they must be aligned to what it is that you desire. So here are the questions. I know that was a whole long winded, but that needed to be explained. So I want you to decide what makes a good investment for you. And you will need to listen to part one in order to fully answer this, at least in a way that is cohesive, coherent, and aligned for you. Okay. And it's okay if it changes. I fully expect that it will change. And you'll know if you watch part one why that is. So the other part then is for the investments that you already invested in, whether it's money, time, energy, commitment, focus, whatever relationships, whatever is the resource that you are invested in. Okay. You are the investor and you have invested a certain amount. Is it giving you the return on investment that you desire or that you need? Because sometimes we have a need for something and sometimes we have a want or a desire for something. Both are equally valuable, but they have a time and a place. And I want you to think even for your relationships, right? Are you investing in a relationship and you're not getting back what you need? Maybe in this season, you have to decide to pull out your investment, right? It doesn't mean that I'm out. It just means that maybe you're not sitting at that table, right? If we use like a poker analogy, and I know that, that's not quite the best because we're talking about investments and investments not quite gambling, but you'll know why this might have popped into my mind when you watch the first video. So, there's times when we're all in, right? Like I just think when I had my babies, when they were relying on me and they were like attached to my boobs, because I was their food source, I was heavily invested, right? But then when I went back to work and they started eating solid foods and they started having to go to daycare, I was still invested, but it was different, right? And now that they're in their teenage years, there are certain things I'm not invested in. I'm not invested in them doing laundry. I'm not invested in them cleaning their rooms. That's on them. Does this make sense? So sometimes you have to pull completely out of relationships. There are friendships, there are interactions with people that I have completely removed myself from because it's not conducive to what I desire in my life. And every time that I interact with those individuals, it lowers my focus, it increases my pain and frustration, it diminishes my peace, it takes away my joy. And those are choices. Like I allow them to do that. So I decided to take the power back and say, I'm no longer willing to be an active participant, an active investor saying yes to these things because I have the power to do that. And that's what I want you to decide now. I want you to really think through and take the time, right? Take the things that are giving you the biggest level of frustration. Take the areas where you need them to work the most and really think thoughtfully about what it is that you are expecting. And if they're not meeting your expectations, why are you allowing those investments to continue? You have the power. You can now choose because you have different information, right? And this is not condemnation. This is not about blaming. This is not about shaming. We don't play that game here. This is about just saying, hey, this is where I am now, and I'm making different choices because I have different priorities. And I've woken up and now realized that what worked for me, even if it was just an hour ago, what worked an hour ago for me is no longer going to work for me. Like I changed my mind. You have the prerogative to do that. It is okay. Okay. So, with that, I am going to encourage you to go back, watch this replay because there's a lot of, I personally think a lot of golden nuggets that were dropped in here. Go back and add in your notes because it helps us to confirm what we have learned when you can implement. Go and take action as quickly as possible. Um, because again, this is all about integration and implementation. This is not about just mass consumption of information. That's not why we do this. Okay. And if you know that there's somebody who could be helped by this series, share the love, send it over to them. You never know why somebody has popped into your mind. Don't allow your preconceived notions around whether or not they're going to see value in it. If they jumped into your mind, I guarantee there's a reason for that. I guarantee that there's a reason why God has placed them in your heart and your mind, in your spirit, and in your soul for you to be able to share whatever it is. And then it's on them. It's not your job to have to convince them to watch it, right? Your job is to do what's required. And sometimes that's as simple as let me just take the first action step. Okay. So with that, we will be back here for Wednesday, Wealth and Wisdom Wednesday, and our regular Money Matters Masterclass series whenever we come back on. So, with that, we will see you very soon. Bye bye.